You're listening to Glove Up or Shut Up on the Angry Marks Podcast Network.
You're listening to Glove Up or Shut Up on AngryMarks.com with Peter H. and Stevie J. Find them on Twitter at HardcoreCDN and at AngryMarks. And now, for all news, reviews, and interviews in mixed martial arts, it's time for Glove Up or Shut Up from AngryMarks.com.
And welcome everybody to another episode of Glove Up or Shut Up right here at AngryMarks.com. My name is Peter H. and I'm joined once again by my co-host from Omaha, Nebraska, Stevie J.
And I'm going to do a little Conor McGregor for you. Are you ready?
Oh boy, here we go.
Rafael dos Anjos, he's a pussy. They pulled out of the fight, man. He can't take a fight. He's got no heart. He's got no soul.
And there's our explicit rating for this episode, everybody.
Well, what do you think he'd say if he was here right now? He'd say the same thing.
Well, he's probably thinking Dos Anjos is a soccer fan after finding out he broke his foot on Friday.
Yeah, what the hell was he doing in training? Apparently, he wasn't just kicking soccer balls. He must have been kicking steel weights.
What happened was he was sparring on Friday, and the guy he was sparring with, Dos Anjos, threw a kick, and Dos Anjos' foot made a solid connection with his sparring partner's kneecap.
Oh, man. But you're supposed to be wearing pads for that.
Yeah. Tell a Brazilian to go easy in training.
Oh, good grief. That's of all the stupid ways to get injured and ruin a pay-per-view main event. I mean, really. It's mind-boggling, especially this close to the pay-per-view taking place. It's like less than a week and a half away now.
We've got Bellator and UFC cards to review. We've got Bellator and UFC cards to preview this week. I do want to give a quick shout-out to Todd Martin. Thanks again for being our guest last week. That was a great show, and it was kind of nice to have a third man in the booth, so to speak, but
absolutely. And everybody please be sure to check him out on SureDog, the LA Times, Pro Wrestling Torch, all those good places.
From where we were with Todd last week to where we are today, it's like it was a million years ago.
It's like the gravity of the entire planet has been flipped upside down. Everything we knew is now completely up in the air.
As of this recording, we woke up this morning and the news sorry, bad pun. McGregor needed a new opponent for the pay-per-view, and it's a short turnaround, and there were names being thrown out there. I've heard of at least 2 or 3 fighters, Stevie, that have turned down this fight.
We've heard of one who we're going to name here, and I'm going to apologize because as we're recording this, it's supposed to break on SportsCenter later tonight, so we're either going to be right or wrong when I say this, but it's the same man who told Conor McGregor, get down on your knees and beg me, and I'll fight you.
Now, please tell me this is not like an interim title bout.
Well, I believe if it's going to be Nathan Diaz, as I'm hinting at, they're going to make it for an interim lightweight title. Because you're not going to get Diaz to fight for anything less.
Now, my memory's a little hazy is the best way to say it, but how many fights does Conor have at 155?
0.
And I know he's a champ at 145, but what is Diaz's ranking right now?
In the lightweight division, let me pull that up for you. Currently, the updated standings following this weekend's show, Cowboy versus Cowboy, he would be number 5. He moved up 1 spot to 5.
Wow. So, an unranked fighter who's making his debut in the division is getting an interim title shot against the number 5 fighter just because his name is Conor McGregor.
And just because the other guy's name is Nathan Diaz.
So he'll be if he wins, I know it's a big if, everybody, but if he wins, he'll be the undisputed 145 champ and the interim champ at 155.
Or, if Nate Diaz wins, he gets to immediately leapfrog everybody ahead of him, from Anthony Pettis to Khabib Nurmagomedov to Eddie Alvarez to getting a unification bout with Rafael dos Anjos whenever he recovers from his broken foot. So any of those guys he would leapfrog over. Can't be too happy about that.
I heard a rumor. Now we're going to talk about fighters who have been approached for this fight. Obviously, Donald Cerrone was a big name that was rumored to get this fight. If it is Diaz, I got to put that if out there. But I heard Frankie Edgar was offered this fight and he turned it down.
Yeah, I don't think he could get ready for a lightweight fight in time, and he's been so successful at featherweight that he really wants to stay there and challenge Conor McGregor. He's not running away from that fight. He wants Conor at 145. And speaking of the rumors, Cerrone, that would be very hard considering he just came off a main event where he debuted at welterweight, and you're expecting him to go back down to lightweight in less than 2 weeks? I don't think that could be done.
I'd be afraid of the potassium build. You know what? We're going to get to the potassium buildup later on in the show.
Yes. Words I never want to hear again after a mixed martial arts event include, and I quote, acute renal failure due to high potassium levels, unquote.
I never want to hear the term fighter's heart stopped in the hospital later that night.
That too, but we're getting to that later. Right now, speculation has included Nate Diaz, Donald Cerrone, and if you look at these other guys in the top 5, they've all fought too recently or have injuries. Like Eddie Alvarez just fought recently, El Kakui, Tony Ferguson just fought recently, Khabib's had all kinds of problems, Pettis has a big fight coming up, and they probably can't take him out of that and reschedule it, so...
Pettis would be a good fight, though.
Yeah, Pettis would be like the only name feasible other than Nate Diaz right now.
Another name that I heard, now obviously some fans were screaming, put Lawler in there. I'm like, no, Lawler's not going to fight him. But there was talk perhaps Uriah Faber.
I think that would screw up the bantamweight division too much right now because they've got big plans for him going forward.
There's a great story there.
Mm-hmm. And by the way, Nurmagomedov is scheduled to fight El Kakui on April 16th, so I don't think they want to break that fight either.
No, but that's going to be a great fight too.
Of course, that's potentially the next contender.
Now, if it is Nate Diaz fighting Conor McGregor, do you think they're going to have a trouble selling this fight with the promos?
I think those two could easily cut some great promos on each other. Oh, and by the way, once again, I found the fight I was thinking about. The next fight they've got scheduled for Anthony Pettis is Edson Barboza on the UFC Cormier vs. Jones 2 pay-per-view.
No offense to Barboza, but if it was a choice between fighting him or Conor McGregor in the main event of a pay-per-view,
I'd choose Conor McGregor, obviously.
10 times out of 10 on that one.
As he says himself, it's red panty night when you fight me.
I don't know what to say to that. That's one of those lines where you just shake your head and it's like, okay, here we go.
It's that rapper swagger he has. I've told you this before. He says if he was black, he would be a professional rap artist because the way he talks and the cocky things he says, he comes across like he's hip-hop.
Someone tried to tell me that, you're going to love this. Someone tried to tell me that Snow was from Ireland. I'm like, no, Snow is Canadian. Remember Informer? That's a Canadian rapper, dumbass.
Right.
But if I was like that swagger that he had was comparable to McGregor, I'm like, dude, no, just walk away. Like, yeah. I know you're 10 years younger, but go away.
No comparison. I mean, not even close. We're talking like Kanye West levels of swagger when it comes to Conor McGregor.
Well, it took how many episodes? We got our first Kanye reference on it.
Well, let's make it the last. Let's move on.
All right, let's move on to Bellator 149, I think it was.
Yes, indeed.
149 in the great state of Texas, and we'll get there in a moment. Main event was newsworthy, but not as newsworthy as the co-main event with Kimbo Slice fighting Dada 5000.
Kevin Ferguson and DeFear Harris. That's their birth names.
Yes.
So.
And I said on this show, I do not expect this fight to go the full 3 rounds.
You were almost wrong.
I know, but when it started round 3, I'm like, oh dear God, there's 5 more minutes of this shit.
Well, let's explain to everybody if they haven't seen this show, and how
could you not?
Yeah, 2.5 million people watched this thing, so I'm shocked if you didn't if you're listening to this show. But just in case, the first round, they were both blown up after 2 minutes. Neither one of them could do a damn thing to the other. They were just standing there like, you throw a punch. No, you throw a punch. And then Kimbo would get a takedown. And then he would do nothing. And Dada would just fall over, and Kimbo would fall on top of him and get mount. And in the second round, he was stood up from full mount for doing nothing.
That happens all the time.
Yeah, when have you ever seen that? There's like one other recorded instance in history of somebody being stood up from the full fucking mount. But it happened in this fight.
All this fight needed, Stevie, to make it a complete clusterfuck was a spilled bag of ice.
Yeah, that actually might have helped because it would have given them more time to catch their breath. I mean, look, I've got to put this out here right now. Okay. I described it during my live play-by-play for MMA Mania as watching them throw punches is like cutting molasses with a fork. That's how slowly they were throwing their damn punches at each other.
And it really sucks because every fight leading up to the co-main event, this card was looking pretty good.
Yeah, and then we hit a train wreck, a cluster, a shitstorm. The feces smacked into the rotary blade and sprayed everywhere at the Toyota Center. This was, out of all the fights I've ever seen that I can call abominations, it's top 5. This is like Caleb Starnes running away for 15 minutes bad.
You had to go there, eh?
Well, if I'm making a top 5 list of worst things I've ever watched, that's on it.
Alright, well.
Dude, let me put it this way. I saw, past their prime, Ken Shamrock and Hoist Gracie have a better fight than this.
True. The main event was better than the co-main event. But the third round, for those who want us to break this third round down, and if you do, send your tweets to @AngryMarks, because I know Stevie's got a few choice words for you. But I digress. The third round was 2 hippos just at the highest peak in Denver, just trying to get as much oxygen sucked into their body as the slow-mo punches were happening.
They had to be helped off their stools. They couldn't stand up on their own.
What commission has allowed that in the past?
This is Texas. Anything goes.
We should put that on a t-shirt. Texas Athletic Commission. Anything goes.
Yeah, so this was ridiculous because, again, they were already asked 2 minutes into the first round and did nothing in the second. So in the third round, they tried very pitifully to throw punches at each other. And Kimbo was slightly more able to stay upright than his opponent. And that was all it took. He didn't knock him out. He just let Dada fall over from exhaustion. I mean, he was theoretically punching him before that, but he couldn't muster any strength in those punches. It was like tapping a feather with a pillow. That's how hard he was swinging here. But Dada just couldn't even stand up anymore because he was so spent, and he flopped, and immediately, like, John McCarthy couldn't wait to rush in and wave this off. He was like, that's it.
That's a mercy stoppage is what it was. But for the Simpsons fans out there, if someone could make the gif of, or the sound effect of Homer Simpson in his boxing career and basically just nudge him, he'll tire himself out. That's what Kimbo did, just nudged him, and down goes Dada 5000.
And down is not saying it enough. He went down and stayed down for about 10 minutes. They needed a stretcher to cart his ass out.
And they took him right to the hospital.
Which is really ironic because when I interviewed Dada 5000, he said, and I quote, they're going to need a helicopter. They're going to have to airlift him out of Toyota Center. I want a helicopter on standby to take him out. Well, he's not the one who left on a stretcher, buddy. You are.
Now, for those who don't know what kind of physical condition Dada 5000 was in, he had to cut 40 pounds to make the heavyweight limit. Heavyweight limit is 255.
260.
So his walk around.
265.
What's that?
You said 250.
What's that?
265.
Oh, 265 now. Okay.
He cut from over 300 pounds to 265 in way too short an amount of time.
So what happens when you cut that much weight is that you get a huge buildup of potassium. That's not good.
This is why you get kidney stones. This is why people's kidneys shut down, because your body cannot process the buildup of potassium because you're sucking all the water out of your body and leaving only minerals behind.
And that led to his, as Stevie put it earlier, acute renal failure.
Yeah. When the parts of your body that should be inside your body are going outside your body, that's a fucking problem.
Now, it scared me when they had a statement released by the family saying at one point the heart stopped. We thank everybody for their thoughts and prayers, and, you know, he's getting better now. He's improving, but we ask for privacy at this time. Bellator, the Texas Commission, everybody involved in this fight is skating a very thin line, because if something was to really happen, we would have lost him. Can you imagine the backlash, Stevie? Can you imagine the negative publicity that the MMA world would have gone through if he, tragically would have passed away in this fight?
It would have been the first recorded death on a professional sanctioned mixed martial arts show. Not an amateur show, not an underground street fight, not some bootleg Indian reservation, get away with it because there's no commission rules. This would have been the first ever North American sanctioned live on pay-per-view or television death in North America.
And I'm not overselling this. I'm not overhyping this. His effing heart stopped in the hospital at one point.
Actually, I thought it stopped in the ambulance on the way to the hospital, but same difference, really. It stopped. His heart stopped.
My question is, and I don't know if I should be asking this, and I never thought I would, do you think he'll ever return to fight in Bellator?
It was a one-and-done contract. He wouldn't be back even if it was. I mean, even if they had signed him for a multi-fight deal, they would just void it, but it's one and done, so he's done. In fact, this is difficult for me to say because I actually like Dada. I've interviewed him several times. He is a very charismatic guy. He is a likable individual. He is also a very educated individual. He's got several degrees. This is a guy that doesn't need to fight for a living. He can be a promoter. He can promote fights. He can educate the public on what fighting is, and he can also do good in his community in Paran in South Miami. He doesn't need to fight, so he shouldn't fight.
Do you think he'd perhaps go to commentary?
Well, the only problem with that is Dada 5000 is incredibly talkative and not very easy to silence. And if you're going to be on commentary, you got to work with somebody, not just run them over. And Dada talks a mile in a yard.
I wouldn't be afraid of having the censorship button. Just have like a standby censor with like a big like red game show buzzer.
Oh, well,
that's a curse word.
You know what? We didn't even get into the hype that came into this fight before this train wreck took place. Yeah, I had to cover this for Mania, so every single aspect of this building it up, I got to sit through, including Dada and Kimbo at the press conference, standing up, yelling at each other using racial epithets and comparing the size of their testicles as Ken Shamrock put his head in his hands and tried to hide.
What was Gracie thinking?
Gracie just sat there like a wax statue. I didn't even know if he was alive. He just kind of sat there and pretended it wasn't going on.
It's like, I don't speak English. I have no idea what he's saying right now.
Oh, he speaks plenty of English. He knew what they were saying.
It's like Anderson Silva. I no speak. I no speak. Yeah, you do.
Yes. The things I never need to hear again in the promotion of a fight. You got baby nuts.
All right, so let's go to the main event. Ken Shamrock and Royce Gracie. Age in the Cage 2. This fight didn't last long, unfortunately.
Well, part of the problem is it didn't last long because there was a foul. Ken Shamrock got fouled in the fight, and the referee did not see it.
And the second one was not a foul. Replays definitely showed it was on the inside of the leg. But
I don't know if I saw a second replay that showed it wasn't, because to me it looked like he got straight jacked in the nuts.
well, the referee stopped the fight. Well, the referee, down goes Ken and Royce.
Yeah, here's the sequence of events. I want to make sure everybody understands the timeline here. Ken gets fouled. He doesn't immediately double over in pain, but Royce gets him in the clinch, hits him with a knee. He goes down. While he's down, he grabs his groin. As he's being pounded out, he's grabbing his groin. Royce gets the stoppage from unloading hammer fists on him, and then Ken immediately gets up, starts yelling at Royce, starts yelling at the referee. He did it on purpose! He did that on purpose!
There's a few things I took away from the end of this fight. One, when the referee is standing next to Royce Gracie, you can see John McCarthy in the background.
Shaking his head.
He's laughing almost, thinking, oh God, they're going to have a rematch.
Well, the animated GIF, as the fight is being announced who won the fight, you can see him shaking his head like, this is a travesty of justice.
Second thing is that the one foul that definitely, it wasn't called and definitely was a foul. The Texas Commission, in their wisdom, gave him a 30-day medical suspension. Here's the problem with that. You know what happens on the 30th day of that suspension?
I tell our audience, tell everybody listening.
He's supposed to fight Dan Severn on that pay-per-view.
Oh, right. The UR pay-per-view?
Yeah.
Well, I don't know if that's going to happen.
Well, it's the 30th day. Arizona could be like, no, today's the day. He's cleared as of today. You know what I mean? There's that wiggle room. But from what I saw, do you think he needs 30 days to recover from that?
From a kick to the groin or from being pounded on?
Well,
no,
it's one of those situations.
Obviously, he needed 5 minutes to recover from the kick to the groin, and he didn't get that.
Yeah, but how many guys get ground and pounded for less than, I don't know, what would you say, 10, 20 seconds?
I don't know. I don't even think it was that long. It was probably like 5 seconds, but it was 5 seconds where he wasn't fighting back because he was grabbing his crotch.
But then again, it's a 52-year-old man.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. I feel like I'm going to use that phrase a lot during this show, so I apologize in advance. But here's the thing. This isn't even what bothers me. Royce.
This isn't?
Let me tell you. Royce didn't need to stop if the referee didn't stop it for the foul. You're supposed to keep fighting until it's stopped. That's in the rules. So I don't have a problem with that. And Ken was down and not defending himself, and it's in the referee's discretion to stop a fight if you're not defending yourself intelligently. So I don't have a problem with that. The problem that I actually have is in the post-fight interview, when Royce Gracie is asked if he fouled his opponent, he said, "I come from the time when there are no rules, no gloves, no time limit." That's your excuse, buddy? You didn't get the rules and regulations read to you backstage? You suddenly forgot it was 2016? You thought you were fighting 20 years ago in a UFC tournament? How did you not know what the rules were? Are you trying to tell me that you think kicking somebody in the groin is okay just because it used to be okay? Because even back in those days, when people claimed there were allegedly no rules, there were still rules.
Shamrock wasn't wearing one boxing glove.
No kidding. It's a freak show because they're both over the age of 45 and both probably not really in their prime, if we're being generous by calling it prime, but still, there are still some rules. It's just because they're both age in the cage, as you put it, Peter, doesn't mean anything goes.
Now the thing is, if they rematch, and sad to say, there's talk of a rematch.
No. Never again. Neither one of these fights ever needs to happen again.
Okay, but if they do rematch them, what commission would allow this fight to take place?
Hopefully none.
I can think of one.
Texas?
Yeah.
Oh, yeah, but I don't think you're going to convince anybody in Texas to go to this fight again. If they wanted to see it, they paid to see it already. They're not going to go see it a second time. This is a one-and-done deal without a one-and-done contract. You cannot sell this snake oil twice. People aren't going to buy it twice.
You don't think they could hype it, saying this is, like, Shamrock could say, this is it, this is the last time I'll fight? Like, you gotta put some type of spin on it, basically saying, if I don't beat him, my career is over.
Dude, it already is.
I know, but I'm trying to sell it. You know what I mean? I'm trying to think, how could they sell this fight the last time you'll see Shamrock in a cage? Win, lose, or draw, or if he...
This already is. He lost to Kimbo, he lost to Royce. The one time he did lose legitimately, let's not question that, because Kimbo is a one-round fighter, and he beat his ass within that one round. Sloppily, but he beat him. And he lost this fight to Royce Gracie. Yeah, it was bullshit because he got fouled and the ref didn't see it, but nut up and accept it, because I don't need to see you guys rematch. It ain't going to be any better.
So your winners are Royce Gracie and Kimbo Slice. The other fights on this card, Stevie, were pretty darn good.
Yeah, especially, although in its own way it was also kind of sad, Derek Campos and Melvin Guillard. Because I said going into this fight, I said a million times to anybody who'd listen, Melvin Guillard is past his prime and shouldn't be fighting anymore, and he's ripe for the picking if anybody comes along that just wants to go to war with him. And Derek Campos wanted that war, and he got it, and he rocked him in the first round, inexplicably took him down when he could have finished him standing. Then in the second round, he rocked him again, and it was over.
And we're big fans of him.
We're big fans of Melvin Guillard or Derek Campos? Who are you referring to?
No, Melvin Guillard.
Well, Guillard has been an entertaining fighter over the years for both good and bad reasons, so I'd say I respect the body of work that he's put in and how he's entertained me at times. However, in 2016, this dude can barely make weight. He's lost, way too many fights. He's lost, 8 of his last 11 fights now. It's time to hang it up.
You're talking to a card where we had 2 guys who should have hung him up before.
Yeah, and I know you're going to say Melvin Guillard is way younger than Kimbo, Dada, Ken, and Royce. Yes, Yes, he is. But look at his fight record. Look at how many fights he's had before the age of 33, and look how many he's lost out of his last 12 to 15. Tell
All right,
me.
so I know in baseball, the Mendoza line is there. I think with Gillard, you got to think of him batting at the Jens Pulver line at this rate.
Yeah, that's actually the ideal comparison right now because it's a guy that used to be great, that we all love and respect, who should have hung it up a while ago and didn't, and just keeps losing.
So we could have 1, 2, 3, 4 fighters that could have fought their last fight in Bellator.
Well, I don't see why you bring Melvin Gillard back for another fight. I mean, maybe they've got him under a contract where he owes them a few more fights, but he had a quote-unquote hand-picked opponent in Brandon Gertz. They gave him the main event of a Bellator show to fight him on, and he lost that fight. They gave him third from the top on their tentpole show, and he got knocked the hell out in that fight. What do you do with Melvin Gillard when you bring him in on a bunch of hype as a UFC and fighting legend, and he loses his first 2 fights?
Have him as one of the coaches on the next season of Fight Master. Oh, wait, never mind.
I just don't see where you go with Melvin Gillard from here because he couldn't beat a guy who was allegedly a scrub who turned out to be anything but. Brandon Gertz has proven himself to be pretty damn good. So they gave him another fight with a guy who's had a middling record in Bellator, but was arguably either on the way up or on the way down and was potentially a guy Gillard could beat. And Campos proved that he's not that guy. So you're really going to have to dig deep now to find a guy that Melvin Gillard can beat. And I don't know if it's worth that much effort.
I feel bad even calling him a gatekeeper.
He's not. Let me tell you something. Here's the thing. I know I apologized in advance. I was going to use that phrase tonight, but here's the thing. I talked to Joe Warren today. Joe Warren used the phrase gatekeeper to describe himself. And that caught me off. Yeah, that was my reaction too. That caught me off guard. So I asked him, you are one of the best fighters ever in Bellator, whether people like you or not, because you've been a bantamweight and a featherweight champion, and you've beaten both of the guys that are fighting in the main event this Friday night. So wouldn't a gatekeeper be a guy more like Rafael Silva, a guy that you beat and your opponent beat? And his response to that was, to me, a gatekeeper is a guy who had a title who no longer has a title. Rafael Silva has never had a title.
Wow, my definition of gatekeeper, unless Joe Warren is legally changing his name to Stephan Bonner, he is not a gatekeeper.
No, I was trying to put that to him. I was saying to him, Rafael Silva is more the gatekeeper in Bellator than you are, but in his own definition, a gatekeeper is somebody important, and Rafael Silva isn't as important as him, so that's how he chooses to define what a gatekeeper is. But to me, a gatekeeper would be somebody above the level of Melvin Gillard, because a gatekeeper is a guy that you beat on your way to a title shot, which I would say Rafael Silva is, and Melvin Gillard ain't on anybody's way to anything. Will Brooks doesn't need to beat him. Michael Chandler doesn't need to beat him. Josh Thompson doesn't need to beat him. Nobody in Bellator needs to beat Melvin Gillard to get to anything.
No.
And again, you said it, we like Melvin Gillard, but he's at that Jens Pulver level now.
Is there anything else you want to talk about on this card before we move on to the show on Sunday, Cowboy versus Cowboy?
Okay, Linton Vassell showed he's improving as a fighter. He had better cardio, better striking. Emmanuel Newton, I love the guy, but he just showed nothing in this fight. And he kept trying to land that spinning back fist, and it wasn't connecting. And he just seemed to be out of gas in the third round. So my prediction was correct on that one, and Linton Vassell won the rematch. As for the other fight on the main card, Emmanuel Sanchez and Daniel Pineda, kind of not that exciting. So I guess we can take away from it the fact that Emmanuel Sanchez picked up another split decision win, because that's all he does, third straight time now. But he wins, but he doesn't win excitingly. He's the points fighter. He's a guy that finds a way to get judges to give him a decision.
Does he train with Ben Askren?
No, but he does train at Duke Rufus, Team Rufus Sport. So he and CM Punk are kind of running buddies.
Now, you mentioned CM Punk. I'd be remiss if I didn't ask you this. Do we see him in the UFC in 2016 at all in a fight with McGregor?
I think he can be back from back surgery in time for UFC 200.
See, this is the same back surgery that Cain Velasquez had, though. But then again, you're comparing apples and oranges. But then again, you're not. They were both wrestlers. I'm using the air quotes, wrestlers. But the argument can be made.
Yeah, and you wouldn't be the first to make it. So I will say I expect him to fight this year.
All right. Let's move on to UFC Cowboy versus Cowboy. If there was one show that should have taken place in Dallas, Texas, it should have been this fight.
Indeed, but as we predicted when we talked to Todd Martin, Alex Oliveira, decent fighter, not on Donald Cerrone's level.
No. This took all of what? What was the official time on this? This wasn't a long fight.
I was going to say a couple of minutes, but let me just pull up the stat sheet here, find out exactly how long it was, but it didn't feel like it took very long. It seemed like it was over in a heartbeat. It was...
They should have put the title of Cowboy up for grabs in this fight.
It was 2 minutes and 33 seconds before he locked on that triangle choke.
That was a good choke.
That was slick. He didn't look like he lost a step at welterweight, which is exactly what we were talking about. And of course, Todd pointed out there's a murderer's row of guys in that division. He's right about that, but at least when you're starting out at the bottom end of the pool and swimming your way into the deep waters, you want to look good at the beginning, and he sure did.
Now on Twitter, there were some people. I love watching the Twitter timeline. I have that app that does the updates in real time.
Yeah.
So you get all these random quotes just flying by your screen, right?
Yes.
And the one I saw was something about, I think this fight is fixed because no way you tap out that quickly to a triangle choke. And the guy, before I could even type it, someone beat me to it and goes, "You do know it's Cerrone choking you out, right?" Like, I'm sorry, if Cerrone's got me in a triangle choke, yeah, I'm tapping quick. I'm not sticking around. There's no way.
No, especially a guy his size with his kind of reach and flexibility. He can wrap those long legs around your head and make you regret the day you were born.
As someone famously said in The Replacements, he's bendy.
Yeah, he is very bendy.
But not a big surprise that Donald Cerrone moves on. And whether, I know we said at the beginning of the show that Diaz got the fight with McGregor. Until we hear it from the horse's mouth, until we get official confirmation, if Cerrone does fight McGregor, I don't think it's 2 weeks. The timing isn't right. I think it will be Diaz. But, man, Cerrone's got 2 weight class, well, now 1, I guess, if he sticks at welter. But there's a lot of opportunity for him now at 170. And you gotta think, it's not when he fights in 2016, but how many more times will you see him fight this year?
And in what weight class?
I think he's done in 155.
You think this is permanent?
I think so. Unless he fights Conor. I think Conor probably has that power to bring him back to 155, but I think at this stage in his career, he's looking for a different challenge in the 155 class.
Well, and he's climbed to the top of that mountain and found that at the top it was hard to breathe, no pun intended. So maybe he thinks even with a murderer's row ahead at 170, maybe he thinks he's got a better shot there than he had at lightweight. Because at the end, we saw with Rafael Dos Anjos, he got as far as he could and just came up short in 2 different attempts in 2 different situations.
There are certain fights at 170 that he could have that, from a casual fan standpoint, from a hardcore standpoint, there are some really great fights that he could sink his teeth into at 170.
I do not disagree.
But let's move on. You know, this fight was on a Sunday night, going head-to-head with Fastlane pay-per-view. So I was trying to flip back and forth, and I'll admit I was trying to, have a split screen going on. I don't know. I had more of my attention on the wrestling pay-per-view because of everything that's happened that weekend in mixed martial arts. I kind of needed a break thanks to Bellator for a few days. You know what I mean?
Right.
But what did you think of the rest of this main card? This main card was good, but it wasn't exactly a one-fight card and on the other end of the spectrum either.
I'd say for a hardcore fan, it would be satisfying, and for a casual fan, they'd probably think, who the hell are these people?
Yeah. I mean, a hardcore fan of mixed martial arts, myself included, they're also pro wrestling fans, and when you book it head-to-head with that, you're gonna skew your audience. You're gonna split them right down the middle.
Right. And whether people like to admit it or not, a lot of mixed martial arts fans are pro wrestling fans and vice versa.
So, is there anything on that main card that really we should speak about, or should we move on to the shows this week because we got lots of stuff to get to this weekend?
Well, there were some ranking fights on here that did shake things up a little bit. You had Derek Brunson and Juan Carnero at middleweight. Brunson won very decisively. Another quick fight here, so I'm sure you enjoyed that, Peter. It only took 2 minutes, 38 seconds before Brunson knocked him the heck out. And as a result of that fight, the middleweight rankings are shaken up a little. Brunson moves up to number 12. Juan Carnero is just barely hanging on at number 15. So the primer that we got as ranking members of the panel said he could drop out of the top 15 altogether with a loss. He didn't, but he came close. And we also had Cody Garbrandt and Augusto Mendez at a catchweight, and that's because Mendez was a very, very late replacement for John Lineker, who unfortunately caught a case of dengue fever and couldn't take the fight. And Augusto tried like hell to get down to 135 on short notice, but couldn't make it. I'm sure they forgave him for it, but he was fed to the wolves here. Again, first round.
You know what dengue fever is?
It's a disease you get in tropical regions.
Oh, really?
Let me look it up.
Yeah, because I was trying to figure this out, and I was like, dengue fever. That's not something you hear every day in MMA circles about why you missed the fight.
Yeah, it's a mosquito-borne tropical disease that symptoms begin 3 to 14 days after infection. It's endemic in, let's see, where are the areas that it's most frequently seen? Dengue fever,
3 to 14 days, and that's a huge incubation period for that, though.
Right, yeah, you could get bit by a mosquito and not know for a long time, but trying to see where it's most commonly, it looks like South Asian and some African nations are endemic with dengue fever. It's also very prominent in South America, a little bit in Mexico, definitely Sub-Saharan Africa. It seems like those are the hot spots. You don't find it in North Africa. You don't really find it in North America. It's almost unheard of in Europe and Russia.
Yeah, it's too cold for that.
I guess so, yeah. Not good ideal mosquito breeding weather, so it's in countries that have high mosquito populations.
Yeah, so dengue fever, that's something I hope we never hear the rest of this year.
Probably not, but a lot of fighters live in the subtropics and tropical areas, so you may see it again.
I agree. You should forgive a fighter for missing weight on a very late replacement. Like, hey, can you take this fight? Try to cut as much weight as possible, but, just we're going to give you a pass if you can't make the limit here.
Right, yeah, I don't fault him for that, but like I started to say before we got on the segue about dengue fever, he was a lamb to the slaughter here. Garbrandt ate his lunch and TKO'd him at 418 of the first round, so that was that. And speaking of people who probably shouldn't be fighting anymore, Joe Riggs got just destroyed with knees by Chris Camozzi. 26 seconds. I like Joe. I would say the same thing as Melvin Gillard. I like him. He's entertained me a lot, but please hang it up.
Yeah, those knees, I sometimes make the joke of stop, he's already dead. Those knees were brutal. Like, it's like he owed him money or something.
Indeed. Now, I'll skip the rest of the stuff on the main card because there's something on the prelims that I want to talk about. Lauren Murphy and Kelly Fischoles.
I saw her face afterwards. Yeah.
Yeah, exactly. And the fact that she got this finish with 5 seconds left in the third round. I've always liked Lauren Murphy, but man, that is incredible to just have the presence of mind to just keep going for that finish with that little time left.
And for those who say the fighters don't hear the 10-second warning, I think they do.
I think she turned it up a notch, like, it's now or never, I'm going to go out there and get this fucking thing, and she did.
I don't know about your scorecard, because I actually caught the entire fight here. I had this fight 1 round apiece. Like, you hear that 10-second warning, and you know this fight is tied, you're going to go all you can to see if you can steal a victory in the last 10 seconds.
Absolutely. In fact, they got the fight of the night bonus for it, and this was on Fight Pass, so that should tell you why I'm talking about this fight right now. Go out of your way to watch a replay.
Now, let's move on to this weekend's shows, and before we move on to Bellator, I do want to mention a quick note about the UFC show. If you live in Canada, the Fight Network, if you have it, is going to be airing the entire Fight Pass card, but they only if you live in Canada.
All right.
They have the Canadian rights for it, so you don't have to have Fight Pass to watch this show.
And before you move on, I'll make a really, really quick note about World Series of Fighting. Go to MMA Mania if you want to read my recap of it, but the basic thing you need to know about this card is in the main event, Joseph Barajas got destroyed with kicks to the leg. I mean, he got the leg kicked out of his leg, to use one of your favorite pro wrestling references. He couldn't stand. He crumpled on his leg. The fight was waved off immediately. Marlon Moraes just destroyed him.
Are you surprised?
Not really, because Marlon Moraes has been undefeated for many, many years now, has won 9 fights in World Series of Fighting, has defended his title 3 times. They're kind of in the position where challengers are getting hard to come by in that promotion. They don't have enough guys for him to face, and I think he knows it too, because in his post-fight interview, he started challenging people at 145 and 155.
I'm surprised he's still in the promotion.
I think they pay him pretty darn well to stay. I've seen his payout disclosed to the commission. It's usually 6 figures per fight.
Now, if only there was a promotion you could go to if you wanted to have a step up in competition. There's only a promotion, Stevie, in North America that he could sign with.
Well, that, like I said, I think they're paying him pretty well to stay, so he's not looking to leave. I've asked him before. I've said this to him. I said, what are you going to do if you run out of people at your weight in World Series of Fighting? And he says, I'm happy here. If people want to challenge me, they can come here to challenge me.
So it sounds to me like he'd rather be the big fish in the small pond.
Well, he's definitely that, because he's wrecking people at 135, so...
And I'm not slighting World Series of Fighting by saying that, but when you look at the mixed martial arts in North America, the landscape, so to speak, you got UFC, you've got Bellator, and World Series is the number 3 player, but there's no way they're competing dollar for dollar and viewer for viewer with UFC or Bellator.
Not really. And
not for lack of trying, though.
You're being kind. Some of the people that I talk to when they hear that I'm covering World Series say less kind things than you're saying right now.
I'm a fan of World Series of Fighting, I'll admit it.
I like the promotion too, but there are people who consider them lower than Access TV fights in terms of their recognizability.
Yikes. I mean, if that was true, they wouldn't be on NBC Sports.
Yeah, well, like you said, you like them, I like them, so let's move on.
Alright, let's talk about, let's go with the Bellator show this weekend. There's a big bantamweight title fight we got to look forward to.
Yep, a rematch, and these guys have a lot of history. The last time they fought, Eduardo Dantas was the champion, and Marcos Galvão was the challenger, coming off of a tournament that he'd won, and Dantas rarely ever knocks anybody out, but he knocked out Galvão in that fight, so they have history, but now their roles are reversed because Galvão submitted Joe Warren to win the title, and Eduardo Dantas beat Mike Rickman, I would say somewhat controversially, because I actually thought Rickman won that fight, but Dantas got the score from the judges and earned his rematch, only now he's the challenger and Galvão's the champion.
So, what's your prediction on this one? Because I'm having trouble picking a winner here.
Well, it's going to be a close fight because they know each other of old, and they are both among the very best bantamweights that are out there right now. And we're talking about guys that Marlon Moraes would be a fun fight if we could see it. I'd love to see him against either one of these guys, but, well, it's cliche to say there's a champion's advantage. That's not always true in every case. But, I'm gonna say I like Marcos Galvão to retain the title in this fight. What do you think?
I really don't want to use a cliche in this one, but the way these guys stack up in the last fight and on this show this Friday night, if the champion retains, it's because of a decision.
Well, I did predict unanimous decision for MMA Mania. I think it's close enough that they'll probably go the full 5 rounds. I don't think cardio is a problem for either of these guys. And Galvão is a guy that goes to a decision a lot of times in his fights.
Yeah, he does.
12 out of 17 times. So I can see him going to a decision here.
Yeah, I hate seeing the fighters working for a decision because I get visions of Ben Askren, which just bugs me in a title fight situation that the guy's fighting to basically hold you down and outpoint you for 5 rounds.
Except in Galvão's last fight with Warren when he won the title, he wasn't trying to outpoint him. He caught him in a knee bar and made Joe Warren scream.
Oh, God, did he ever.
Yeah, exactly. So, maybe this guy wasn't always known as a finisher, but that doesn't mean you can't become a finisher.
Oh, anybody can get caught, Stevie. That's not the issue. It's just, I forgot about that screaming. Oh, I tried to block that out, man. What are you doing?
Sorry, but I'm just pointing out that we know what Galvão's bread and butter is, and that's to outwork people, outpoint people. But he can still find those submissions. Like I said, it's not like he had a record of it before then, but that doesn't mean he hasn't stepped it up to another level. Maybe his training is just that much better now.
Do you think, I don't know if I should say this, but do you think after this fight people are going to say trilogy?
Well, perhaps. But it's been hard enough to get the second fight to take place because there's been injury problems. According to Galvão, those are all Dantas' fault. And according to Joe Warren, those are all Dantas' fault. They both seem to think that Dantas is injury prone. So maybe a third fight isn't the way to go here.
Yeah, I hope not, because we've seen so many trilogies over the past little while that with someone who's quote unquote injury prone, I don't want to see that, because we'll get a situation where they're going to fight when one's 52 and one's 40. No.
Right, exactly. Well, I've got my prediction, so I say Galvo, unanimous decision, and we can move on to the co-main event.
Okay, go.
You don't remember what it is, do you?
No, I was trying to remember where this show is taking place. I can't even remember that.
It's in Mulvane, Kansas, at the Kansas Star Casino.
Oh, I always forget Mulvane. I don't know what it is about that arena. It's just it.
Well, let
I
me
want to
tell
say
you. Let me tell you from having been there, it's in the middle of nowhere.
they should have like a banjo playing in the background during the intro package.
I mean, it's not that bad. It's not like tumbleweeds rolling across the prairies or anything, but it's like nothing, city casino. It's like, holy shit, here it is.
Now, is David Rickles on this card?
Yes, he is. We'll get to that.
Okay, because I thought for some reason I thought that was the co-main, but I know that's not right.
Well, they could flip the order around, but I'm going in the order that I have it on my sheet.
Okay, who you got?
Czech Congo versus Vinicius Spartan Quiroz. You don't seem thrilled. You don't seem thrilled at all. I heard you sigh.
I'm not a fan. No, I'm not a fan of this fight. I hope this fight surprises me. I really do.
Well,
but Congo...
Spartan is a finisher. He's won 75% of his Bellator fights. You know, he's the guy that just blew through LeVar Johnson and humbled a kickboxing legend like Everton Teixeira, just took him apart on the ground. So Spartan Quiroz could do that to Czech Congo, but I know where you're coming from because you're used to Czech Congo winning grueling fights.
Yes, and grueling is an understatement.
But I think when you say that, you should also look at the totality of Congo's record, because a lot of the reputation that he has, some of it fair, some of it unfair, comes from his time in UFC. But when you take his career on the whole, including his fights in Bellator, he's actually a pretty good finisher. He's got more submissions, more knockouts than he does decisions. 16 total compared to just 7 decisions. So I think some of that is traceable back to UFC and people thinking of him as a boring UFC fighter when that isn't necessarily the case.
But if I'm booking a Bellator show, I want to have a Bellator star in the co-main. And I think David Rickles fits that bill better than Czech Congo.
But as I just said, Congo has been a Bellator fighter for a while now. This is like going all the way back to 2013. He's got a 5-2 record in Bellator. I think it's fair to say he's a Bellator star now.
Even to the casual fans?
Maybe there are still some casual fans who think of him as a UFC fighter. I won't argue that.
So who do you have in this one? Do you have Congo winning?
I have Vinicius Quiroz via split decision.
Oh, no, I don't want this fight going to decision. Congo loses in the second round. Maybe,
but I think that Spartan's advantage here is his size. He's 6'4", or what is it? Is it 6'4" or 6'7"? Let me double check that before I say. Congo is 6'4".
Yeah, Congo is 6'4".
Yeah, and Quiroz is 6'7". So it's a fairly tall heavyweight versus a really tall heavyweight. And I know this has bitten me in the past when I've made a prediction based on that, but I like the size and reach of Spartan. I feel like that's going to be a little too much for Congo to handle.
Just watch out for those Superman punches, you'll be fine.
Yeah, I suppose so.
All right, let's move on. David Rickles and Bobby Cooper.
Super duper Bobby Cooper. I'm not kidding, that's his nickname.
Well, add that to the list of bad names then.
Well, some people would say the caveman David Rickles is one too, but I wouldn't, because few guys that I've ever seen fight live or talk to on the phone have ever fit that nickname quite so well. He is a caveman of mixed martial arts.
Oh yeah, no, he's a very entertaining fighter, and a win here, I don't know who you put, like, he's in a weird position when it comes to his place in Bellator right now.
Right, because he's already lost to Michael Chandler twice, so kind of hard to push him up the lightweight ranks at this point.
And I don't think he's on the outs.
No, he's very well liked in Bellator. He's a fan favorite, especially when they book him in Kansas. He's adored. It's like Jesus walking on water.
I've got Rickles winning this one.
Yeah, I hate to say this, but they're pretty much feeding Bobby Cooper to the wolves here. He got a split decision over Pablo Villaseca in his last fight, but he's not really that high up on the food chain of lightweights, and Pablo Villaseca wasn't even on that chain at all. So that was a bottom of the barrel fight, and he squeaked it out. And David Rickles ain't no bottom of the barrel fighter. He's a live by the sword, die by the sword guy. And even though that's bit him in the ass before with guys like Michael Chandler, who are just a little more accurate and a little more powerful, most of the other guys that he faces are going to go down when he hits them.
Let's move on to Kendall Grove against Francisco France.
This is a very intriguing fight for me. France is a prospect. He's absolutely got to be recognized as an up-and-coming middleweight. He's 13-3-1. 12 out of 13 of his wins are by submission. You can't look at this guy and not think future championship potential. But he's not that well known. Even though he hasn't lost a fight since 2012, he's still a guy looking to make a name for himself. He'd like that guy to be Kendall Grove, the former Ultimate Fighter winner. But Kendall Grove actually showed me something in the Joey Beltran fight. Now, I don't know if that's because the Executioner is another one of those guys that we should put out to pasture, like we've said about Melvin Gillard and Jens Pulver. But at least in a fight that could have gone either way with two guys that have been around for a little bit, Kendall Grove showed me some really good striking techniques. And I don't usually think of him as a striking guy. I think of him as the spider. He weaves a web around people and submits them. But in this fight, he let the Executioner chase him down and was just nailing him with counter shots. And maybe that'll work against Francisco France, but I don't think so. I think
it's a very entertaining fight, that's for sure.
Yeah, I predict it goes the distance. I know you don't like that. I think he'll be smart enough not to play the counter-striking game with Kendall Grove, and Kendall Grove's one chance is going to be to go to the ground with him. And if he does, I think Kiko France might get the submission, even though the Spider is longer, more around, more veteran, but just looking at the number of submissions that Kiko France has gotten in fights, it's like Goichi Yamauchi, and I know that fight's not for a couple more weeks, but when you look at the guy's record and you look at how many submissions he's had in his wins, when it gets up to like 70, 80, 90% of his wins, that's just a guy you don't want to be on the ground with. It doesn't matter if you're a black belt. You just don't want to be on the ground with somebody like that.
As long as Grove can check his leg kicks, I find a lot of his offense is leg-based.
Mm-hmm.
Because that reach advantage, it's crazy. If he can learn to play defense and check those kicks and doesn't just absorb them like a certain fighter, well, it still pisses me off.
Right.
But I think with Grove, you got to think his offense is in those legs. I think, it'd be really nice if he just did a leg kick of doom and just knocked him out like Crow Cop.
That's true, but you're right. That's the other thing that was kind of surprising about seeing him outstrike Joey Beltran. Was that he's got so much reach and so much length, but he was actually using his fists instead of his legs. So That's why I don't want to completely write Kendall Grove off in this fight, because I think, despite the fact that he's barely over the Mendoza line, which you brought up yourself earlier when we talked about fighters, he's just hovering over that Mendoza line, but
we're renaming it the Pulver line.
The Pulver line, then fine, but Kendall Grove hovers just above that Pulver line, but I saw something from him I hadn't seen before in his last fight, and I don't know if that means he's that good because he fought a guy who's more washed up than him, or if he's improving as a fighter overall.
You know what? I've got something to say. You know, listeners of this podcast, I want you to send a tweet to @AngryMarks. Who do you think? I want 3 fighters. It can be UFC, Bellator, World Series. Give Stevie 3 fighters who are below the Jens Pulver line.
And what would the point of them giving those 3 fighters to me be? What do we achieve? Are we like calling out fighters who should retire by doing this? What are we saying?
Well, I'm curious to see what the listeners of the podcast consider this fighter is under, or this fighter, you know what I mean? I want to see what, I'm going to come up with 3, Stevie, you should come up with 3, and let's just see what names are in the discussion right now, because you know that coming up, I would say in 2 months at least, we're going to get another mass spring cleaning in the UFC.
Mm-hmm.
There's way too many fighters on the roster right now, and you always know they're going to be cutting and cutting and cutting. I know they got a lot of shows, but I just have this feeling they're going to cut 10, 15 more fighters real soon, next 2 months.
You might be right. We'll just have to wait and see. But back to this Bellator card, I've got Kiko.
There's one fight I do want to ask you about, because I don't know these 2 fighters, and I'm curious to get your take on it. And it's Lena Ochakanov against Rebecca Ruth.
I believe it's Ovichnikova.
Okay.
Ovichnikova. That's my best pronunciation of it. I'll get corrected when Michael Williams introduces her on Friday. So this is a flyweight fight, and Rebecca Ruth is a very, very tough fighter who hasn't really been seen on the big stage yet, but her biggest fight, the only one that she lost, was to Jocelyn Jones-Leibarger, who we saw Tisha Torres get really pushed to the limit by Leibarger in their fight, which a lot of people thought Leibarger was being fed to the wolves. So I'd say that's a quality opponent for both of them to have fought, and to me that speaks fairly highly of Ruth's skill, that that's the only person in 6 fights that she lost to. Now, Ovichnikova, she's great when it comes to kickboxing. She's been a champion, a world champion, multiple times in kickboxing. But when it comes to mixed martial arts, she seems to have hit a brick wall of late. I'm not sure she can get any further than she's gotten right now, because it just, something about her style is not translating over to mixed martial arts. She's lost 3 of her last 5 fights, and to me that says that she's relying too much on a kick-based offense, and she's not preparing for hands and feet. She's not preparing for the ground game, and if Rebecca Ruth just can double leg her and beat her up on the ground, I get the feeling Ovichnikova isn't going to have an answer for it. So I'm picking Ruth.
I'm curious for this fight. I'll pick Ruth, but it's one fight I'm going to have a keen interest in.
Yeah. We haven't seen enough of either one of them to be 100% sure, but they asked me to put my reputation on the line and make picks for MMA Mania, and I'm doing the same thing there. I'm picking Ruth there as well.
All right, we're running short on time, so let's just go right to UFC Fight Night 84, Silva Bisping. In London, Bisping's undefeated in England. Does the streak continue? Does he upset the Spider?
In my heart, what I would like to see as a longtime fan of Bisping, that would be a fantastic, swan song to his career. He could go out on a high note, having beaten a legend and could call himself a legend himself. Even though it's not for a title, there's nothing on the line other than pride. What a feather in his cap that would be to go out with a win over Anderson Silva.
In your home country.
In your hometown, basically.
Yeah.
So,
hometown even better.
I mean, technically no, because it's in London and Bisping is from Nottingham, so not quite the same thing, but... Or no, wait, he's from Manchester. I'm sorry. Forgive me, English fight fans. He's from Manchester. I think of Nottingham because I've got a friend from there. Anyway, it's not going to happen. The odds makers don't think it's going to happen.
If it does, it'll be up there for upset of the year.
Let's see what the current line is, because the last time I looked at it, it
can't be that high.
It wasn't great. It certainly didn't suggest to me that Bisping had a really good chance in this fight. But of course, we've seen a lot of things go the opposite way you'd expect when there are huge odds on the line. So, right now it's minus 310 for Silva, plus 255 for Bisping.
That's not bad.
That gives him a puncher's chance.
Alright, so there's two other fights I want to talk about before we wrap up the show. Gegard Mousasi against Diaz.
Almost the same flipped around. It's minus 325 for Mousasi and plus 265 for ladies.
Be a good fight, though.
I think Mousasi, if he keeps it in his wheelhouse, which is lots of punches and kicks and not really a whole lot on the ground, I think this is Mousasi's fight to win.
And the other fight I'm curious about, and this might surprise you, Stevie, I really want to see Brad Pickett and Francisco Rivera.
I think that's a fight with a lot of potential, and it's a fight that's very close on the line. It's plus 180 for Pickett, and Rivera is minus 220 as the favorite.
No offense to Kabalov and Park, but I mean, I'd rather see Pickett and Rivera.
Well, Habilov and Park is minus 255 for Habilov, plus 215 for Park, but I expect Habilov to win that handily.
And somebody asked me, does Tom Breeze continue his undefeated streak? It's like, maybe.
Yeah, he's minus 1,000.
It's one of those things where never ask me, will the undefeated streak continue? And I'll just say Undertaker. He's going to get beat eventually. I don't know if this is going to happen this fight, but no fighter will ever retire undefeated.
No. I said it to many people who told me that Ronda Rousey would retire undefeated, and that was long before she fought Holly Holm. And I got in very heated arguments with certain people about it, and they said, dude, she's the greatest woman ever. She will retire undefeated, blah, blah, this, blah, blah, that. I'm like, no. Everybody loses eventually.
No, I even told you on the show, there were 2 or 3 fights where I picked Rousey's opponent just because I thought she was due for a loss.
Right. Well, the one time we didn't was the one time she did.
Should have had Gigi on there to defend the boxing.
Right.
But is there any other fights on the England show you want to talk about?
Let me just take a quick little scan of the card here. See if there's anything that we didn't already talk about that we should. And nope.
Well, Jimmy Manuel was supposed to be on this card, but he got hurt, so
right.
He's supposed to fight Nikita Krylov.
I guess I feel a slight whiff of interest in seeing Omelnichuk against Dono. Not because I have any idea who Dono is, but because I feel like Omelnichuk is a guy that if he went on a run, he could probably find himself fighting guys that are like near the bottom 15 of the heavyweight division, because that heavyweight division is very fluid right now. So if he's strung together a few wins, he could be a contender.
Yeah, but then again, you gotta look at Dono's record. He's 6-0, but if you look at where those, like, he's 6-0-1 really, but the level of competition is definitely increased in this fight, and we're going to see if he's worthy of the hype of being an undefeated fighter making his debut in the UFC, or it's you fought 6 scrubs.
Yeah, well, as of right now, it's a pick'em fight. It's minus 110 for both guys, which is why I say this intrigues me. I want to see if Melnichuk can put together a little bit of a run, or if Dano's going to use him as a stepping stone.
I did want to mention the no contest on his record, Stevie, was due to a timekeeping error.
No kidding.
How many times do we see that?
I can't remember having seen it at all.
Timekeeping error. It's like, well, the round should have ended 15, 20 seconds ago. Let's see what happens here. Just, there's the level between minor league fights and the big time.
Well, sometimes even the big time can look pretty bush league when you got 2 guys over 40 who probably shouldn't be fighting more than 2 minutes.
Let's bring the show full circle, everybody. Stevie, what's on tap for Thursday night AMP this week?
I'm going to try to not get a content ID strike for saying this, but what's on tap for Thursday is Here Comes the Money! Here Comes the Money!
Yes, Mr. Monopoly Man showed up on Raw. No.
Well, he's going to play with some Monopoly money, I'm sure, because they definitely had to throw a big stack at him to get him to come back.
Well, I'll admit my pop culture references aren't what they used to be, but what shoes was he wearing? Are those Jordans?
I can't even remember. I'd have to freeze frame it and get a close look.
I just saw him. Oh, look, it's Shane. I was freaking out. I'm like, what the hell is he wearing? Okay. I was like, his outfit was like, are you a businessman or a kid or both or, huh?
Well, other than his gray hair, he still looks pretty youthful.
Yeah, people are already making the joke he's going to jump off the Jumbotron in Dallas Stadium.
I pretty much said the same thing to Michelle. I was like, yeah, we might be getting our money's worth for this one. He'll find something stupid to jump off of.
Pretty much. All right, well, I just want to give a quick plug. I'm not sure when the show will air. I think it's going to be next week or the week after, but check out superfriendsuniverse.com. I will be on there upcoming discussing one of the best Canadian wrestling pay-per-views WWF has ever put on. That is In Your House Canadian Stampede. Check that out in a few weeks.
Indeed. Hey, if you're going through the archives, you can find some shows that I did with the Super Friends, such as a hip-hop discussion that Big D and I had about the Wu-Tang Clan. And of course, you can find videos from my video game channel as part of the Super Friends universe. So just click on the wheel and scroll down and you'll see Mr. Mega Man Fan.
There you go. Well, for Stevie J, I'm Peter H., the Hardcore Canadian. Thanks for listening. And as I always say, never leave it to the judges. Good night, everybody.
See ya!